understand PDA and I've lowered demands in my home. Why do I still hate my life? This is a question that many parents have asked, and I have asked myself. And today, during this fourth live in the Clarity Workshop series as part of the launch for the Paradigm Shift program, we are going to talk about the parental journey and the patterns I've witnessed and noticed as parents move through the grief, shame, self-loathing, frustration that comes with dramatically shifting the paradigm or the lens through which they view their child and moving towards peace. And then we're going to talk about the trademarked 5A framework that I have developed based on my work with hundreds of families and my own personal lived experience in order to move parents through that process towards peace with less pain and less time. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here. So it is 8:02 on a Sunday morning here in Michigan. It's rainy outside, and I am excited to be with you. So, as I said, we're going to talk about the parental journey. And, oh, hi from Australia. Yeah, I thought some Australians would come on at this time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do it early so some of the Australians can catch the live. But because it is 8:02 on a Sunday, you may hear the kiddos come through. You may see them. So just bear with us. It's not when I'm usually on social media doing stuff. But yes, happy to see the Aussies. Really excited you guys can come to a live, which time zones sometimes make it hard. Okay, let's start with two stories from my personal life that I want to share with you. And I think they are illustrative of many of the points at which parents like us reach in this journey and that are actually quite important. Okay, so the first story that I think some of you will resonate with is the feeling that on a deep, profound level, there's something wrong with you as a parent. So I had this feeling from the moment my child was born, my PDA child, 8.5, almost 9 years ago, where I could not do the most basic thing that I believe to be part of like evolution and my biology of like soothing my infant child, then soothing my toddler child, then soothing my child. It was just not something I could do. He would not be soothed. And so, I spent most of the first months of his life just completely shattered and not understanding how to stop the screaming, the back arching, the fact that my son looked like he was in pain. And, I went through all the things from like the colic drops, like my letdown was too fast. I was changing my diet. I was doing the windy, one of those things that like helps the gas come out. I was pumping his little legs. It wasn't gas. It was a nervous system disability. But of course I didn't understand that. So I walked through my life in Washington, D.C., secretly in my head, probably looking like quite a together human, because I worked in like downtown D.C. in a corporate environment. I had my suit on, my pearls, my heels, looking like I had my SHIT together. But in my head, just tallying like, oh, that woman on the metro with her kids, like she knows how to do it. Oh, that woman at the restaurant with her kids, she seems to be able to soothe her kids. And I would just like tally in my head the fact that the most basic of human things from my perspective at that time, I was not capable of. So a big part of the parental journey, whether or not you're fully conscious of it, and I think some of you are, is this sensation of like there's something broken in me that does not, that whether you're a father or a mother, whether it's a biological child or not, there is this innate sense that you will be able to soothe your child because you're there to protect them. And when you can't, it sort of breaks the identity of who you are as a parent, okay? So part of why I'm so passionate about supporting parents is because I had this secret broken part of my identity that I didn't even realize had affected me as profoundly as it did. And there was like a deep sadness and grief and loss there, right? And it was only when I started to understand my child's brain and nervous system, when I started to view things through a different lens, not take things personally, and have the tools to proactively and mindfully raise a child with a nervous system disability, even when things continued to be hard, I have profoundly shifted my identity as a mother, right? So I don't attach whether or not he's activated to my value or importance as a mother. And this applies to fathers, caregivers, etc. So we're going to come back to that as part of the parental journey. And then my second story that I want to share with you. Oh, hi, Lucky, another Australian. Yes, I was telling people how I was like thinking about like, how can I get the Australians a time that they can actually attend? And I was like, Sunday at 8 a.m. So hello, nice to see you. Okay, so anyways, where was I? My second story. So I'm going to share with you my rock bottom moment, which is actually a very important moment for parents. It's like touching bottom, or the bottom of the trauma cave, or whatever you want to call it, or the giving up that you feel like you're just like, okay, fuck it, I can't do this, right? So there's something, oh, hi, Mom. Sorry for the F word. There's something important about this rock bottom moment because it connects to radical acceptance, which is part of this journey that we're going to talk about. Okay, so as I tell this story, Mom, please don't worry, I'm fine, everything's okay. Just have to say that. But 3 years ago, around this time, I was reaching a rock bottom moment, which was, I learned about PDA, I was lowering demands, I thought I was doing everything I could, I was still in the doing. And this is a point I find a lot of parents. So it's not about like, do you know about PDA, or have you lowered demands or taken action? It's the point at which you're like, I'm doing everything I possibly can, but it's not working. Okay. So at this point, I hadn't fully lowered demands because I was still, thanks, Mom. I was still limiting screen time and trying to impose all of these controls around my son, even though he was in nervous system burnout and couldn't leave the house. Okay. And it was so impossible to, help him regulate his nervous system, because if I wasn't allowing him to be on a screen, I was having to provide that external nervous system scaffolding 100% of the time. And so I was reaching this point where it's like, I actually don't have more to give. And my son was more violent at that point. He was constantly equalizing against me or his younger sibling, who was a young toddler at the time. He was what felt like being verbally abusive, controlling of me, like whether or not I could eat, my line of vision, whether or not I could sit at the couch near him, but then I couldn't leave the room, etc. You guys know the story. So I was just like broken at this point. And I remember sitting across from my husband. I was like, okay, I'm giving up. He can get on the screen. I'm done with this. Like, I'm not doing screen time limits, whatever. He can watch it all day for I care, because I can't do this anymore. And I remember telling my husband, who I love dearly, who's my best friend, who I married because I like spending time with him and he's a good human, but we couldn't spend time together. We couldn't even have conversations because there was just so much equalizing, interrupting us. And I know you guys, some of this will resonate. I sat across from him and I like proposed divorce. And I was like, listen, we don't get to spend any time together anyways. We're both miserable. What if we get divorced and find 2 other competent humans who are well rested and capable and maybe don't have their own kids? We'll marry them and then we'll have 4 adults and maybe we can manage this. And of course he was not cool with what I was saying there, because it was like deeply hurtful to him. But I was just in such a dark place. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I was depressed and I was like not wanting to wake up in the morning, and it was terrible. So that was my rock bottom moment. And we're going to return to this as we're talking about the parental stages and the 5A framework that I've developed and trademarked to walk parents through this process in a much less painful, isolated, and gaslighty way. Okay, so let's talk first about the parental journey. And this is something that not only I've experienced myself, but I've witnessed hundreds of families through, whether it's in the programs I design or in coaching containers. Okay, so there's really 3 categories or stages, but I don't want you to think of these as necessarily being like sequential or not being able to happen at the same time or repeat. But there is like the doing phase, which I associate with like seeking answers, finding the solution, the magic bullet, the option C, like there must be something else here. Next comes the decision making of like, okay, I've done all the individual solutions and things are still hard. So now I have to pan out and see the constraints that I'm operating in, whether it's like where I live or my finances or, our careers. And then like look at these constraints that you thought were static and you can't change, and then change them. So that's structural change. So we had individual and then structural. And then you do that. And I'm going to illustrate these with myself and some anonymized coaching clients. And then you realize it's still effing hard because you have a child who has a nervous system disability, right? And there's aspects of your life that are trade-offs, and there's a cost benefit, and it's not going to look like your peers or other parents with neurotypical children or even other neurodivergencies like ADHD or non-PDA autism, okay? And that's the surrender phase and finding meaning, okay? And this repeats. It's not like you do this and then you're done. It's like peeling back layers of the onion towards finding peace within the constraints and therefore freedom within the constraints that you face, okay? So let's talk about the doing seeking that I experienced. And I'm going to share this with you because I think there's a lot of shame around, therapy and trying to find solutions and these natural tendencies that we have as problem solvers to improve our children's suffering. And this gets back to the soothing part of like, my son seemed like he was in pain most of the time and extremely unhappy. And so it wasn't like, I don't want him to present as autistic and therefore I'm going to put him in therapy. It was like, I need to find a way to soothe the pain that I'm witnessing. So let me just give you a run through of all the individual solutions that I tried, some of which were helpful, many of which were not. Okay, so starting with the parenting solutions, I did 1, 2, 3 magic. I did the timeouts, and when it wasn't working, I doubled down at the request of the pediatricians, tried positive discipline. Then I moved into the sensory framework, and I did all the things of okay, the compression shirt is going to help. Okay, the weighted blanket while he's sleeping, the fidgets while he's at daycare, going to OT 5 times a week to try and fix the sensory stuff, okay? Then I'm okay, shaman, craniosacral therapy, neurofeedback, safe and sound protocol, dye-free diet, supplements, primitive reflex exercises, chiropractic, focus program, laminated charts, first then statements, token system, sticker charts, etc. Okay? So I've done it all. I haven't done ABA therapy, but I would have if a pediatrician had told me to do. So there's no shame in that. I didn't know any different. I just entered into this of my child won't stop screaming. How can I make him stop screaming? Right? It wasn't philosophical. I didn't know anything about neurodiversity affirming anything. I didn't even know what autism was. I just had this stereotypical notion of it. So I want to normalize that this is the process that many, many parents go through, okay? Nobody gets to the point that I'm at gets to the point where they're fully informed and fully neurodiversity affirming and fully positive autistic identity night. It's not you flip the switch and you're there. You have to go through this process, right? So, and I really want to normalize this because frankly, like, sometimes I get comments about, like, you're grieving a living child, and, you're not using the language of neurodiversity affirming advocacy. And it's like, I'm speaking to parents who are stuck, like I was. And frankly, like, if you're already steeped in everything autism as an advocate, like, you probably don't need me to support you, because you have gotten there on your own. And good for you. But, like, I'm not going to criticize a parent who struggles with the mindset shifts, because that was me, right? Okay, anyways, so in terms of parents, what I see in this doing seeking stage, and again, like, no shame, parent-child interaction therapy, PCIT, often this works in the beginning, and then it crashes and burns when you do the second section, which is more behavioral. Applied behavioral therapy. I work with many families who have been through applied behavioral therapy, and then their child reaches burnout, and then it crashes and burns, and we have to take a different paradigm, okay? Cognitive behavioral therapy, speech pathology, OT, all the things, okay? So there's nothing inherently wrong with, like, OT or speech. It's just that we're coming at it as, like, a doing, seeking, fixing, okay? And often parents go through all of this, and then, yes, play therapy. Yes, we've done play therapy, DIR floor time, saw an expert who we paid $250 an hour in Washington, D.C. to, like, teach us how to do play therapy, like, everything. I toured all the play therapy places in Washington, D.C. I mean, I went all in. Like, I'm an intense person when I'm trying to solve a problem. All the things. I made a list. It's not comprehensive. But then you realize, okay, and the nail in the coffin of this seeking solution point of my journey was actually when we received the service dog, okay? And I had thought I had moved past the seeking doing phase, in the sense of, like, okay, I'm accepting my child's disability. I'm bringing in a service dog to support his nervous system. I'm moving towards acceptance. And then when the service dog came, I realized through my grief, loss, anger, and resentment from the fact that it didn't fix the dysregulation or make the nervous system response go away, that actually I hadn't accepted it, right? I thought I had, but then when the dog came, I was noticing my own nervous system activation from the fact that my son was still having panic attacks, and that he was still having a hard time, and that the dog didn't replace my safe nervous system, okay? And how did I know that I hadn't accepted that? It's because of the feelings in my body of, like, and the anger and the resentment and the frustration of, like, this was supposed to fix this, okay? So parents often get stuck in this period, in this doing seeking. And it doesn't mean there's no place for it. It's just we can get stuck constantly searching for the option C of, like, there must be something else out there. There must be a magic bullet that I'm not understanding. So, for example, with siblings, I remember being a parent and, like, scouring the internet and researching everything and reading everything and listening to the autistic advocates and just being like, okay, tell me the answer. Like, where is the answer to the sibling problem? And it was like, ultimately, there's not a solution, right? There's not one magic thing you can do. It's, like, characteristic of the nervous system disability. And so we have to, this is an example of the next stage, see that clearly, accept it, and be like, well, I'm one mom, I have 2 kids, one is externalized PDA and equalizing against the younger one. I actually can't keep them safe if they're off screens, or if I don't have another nervous system. So then I can either choose to put them on screens, watch them equalize each other, or if I can, find another nervous system or split them. Like, those are the options. There's not some super secret thing that I know about that you guys don't. It's just parents won't accept that because it's painful and it's, like, a limitation of your life. And, like, Nobody wants that limitation. And it doesn't mean you don't accept your kid. It just means you don't want to accept that aspect of your life. Okay? So then we move into the decision making, which often isn't as clear-eyed as we would like, right? Of like, okay, I'm going to apply this new parenting framework to the siblings and then it's going to fix it. Okay? But then we need to see the decision making of like, I did all the individual solution stuff. Maybe I need to think structurally about changes. And for us, we've toggled between the individual solutions and the structural changes. Like I used to work at the Pew Charitable Trust as a research manager of a team in charge of research integrity in Washington, D.C. And I left my job. I didn't leave my career thinking like I'll never go back to it. I was like, I'm going to take 6 months, solve the problem, and then go back to some form of academic work, right? But I was like, we need to move closer to my family. We need to be in a smaller town, closer to nature, where we can afford to not both be working. We made these big structural changes, which now include having an au pair live with us, private school, all of these different things. But it is sometimes necessary for parents, and this often comes much later once they've done the doing of like, okay, actually, like, I think I need to change my career or do part-time work or, move from where I am to be closer to networks or where we can afford to have a larger house or a smaller house or whatever it is, okay? So, and, parents don't like to hear it, and it's hard because it's like, sometimes you have constraints and it's financially difficult and all these things. And I'm sorry about that. Like, I can't change that. I can't change the fact that, like, these are our choices, that this is the nature of raising a child with a disability. And it's okay to feel resentment and anger and blame. Okay? So, there's lots of structural changes that families make. This is not just my journey. It's, I've worked with families who have moved from New York to Florida, Florida to Minnesota, East Coast to Alabama, all sorts of different structural changes. Sometimes it's for a particular school. Like they move to a place to be near a neurodiversity affirming school. They move to a place where there's lower cost of living. They move to a place where they have a network, right? Or, unfortunately, I'll say, and I don't think this is uncommon in any disability space, where like often one parent has to leave their career, which ultimately became my case, right? Now this is my career. It's much different than having a boss and sitting in an office 9 to 5 and commuting 45 minutes downtown and being at the behest of a corporate environment, right? Where it's like you have no autonomy. Okay? So then after we make these structural changes, things are still hard. Why? Because you're raising a child with a disability, right? And there are things that you can't fix. And that is really, really difficult. And that's when we move into the surrender. And we're back to the story I told at the beginning, which is the rock bottom. Of like, that rock bottom moment was after I had done all of those individual solutions. It was after I had made the structural changes of leaving my job and moving across the country and all the things. And it was like the moment where I was like, it's still not fixed, right? And then we have surrender. And while this moment feels like giving up, it's actually the moment when accepting the limitations allows you to transcend them. Because instead of focusing on the thing that you cannot solve, you stop focusing on that, you let go, and you make space to see with clarity other things in your life that you do have control over and can make changes with. And you make space for other things to flow in. So I will tell you, in all my work and my personal experience, over and over and over again, this is the moment when things start to shift. Like truly start to change and move towards more peace. And it's really hard to get to that point. And often we think we have gotten to that point and we have to go deeper, okay? And so this is why I have designed this 5A framework for my work with you guys, for the book that I'm writing that I will be going back to. I had to get clarity on this before I could continue the book. But it's also the structure through which I work with coaching clients in the background of my head. We won't necessarily be making it explicit. But in the Paradigm Shift program, it is designed and structured around these 5As. So let's talk about them. What are they? And why do we have them? We have them so you know the journey that you're going through, why you're doing it, and so we're shortening the timelines and the pain and the isolation and the gaslighting of this whole process. Okay, so first we have awareness. Okay, so awareness is simply a true understanding of your child's brain. And I teach a 5 characteristic framework, which if you've seen my Clarity workshop or my Clarity masterclass, which is free, link in my bio, I walk through this in 70 minutes. There are PDFs. So I'm not going to get deep into that here, but it's the 5 things that we look for to understand whether our child is PDA. Survival drive for autonomy, equalizing behavior, high masking, asterisk, not every PDA kid is high masking. Often they are. Constant need for undivided attention, and the fluctuating and cumulative nature of nervous system activation. Okay, so that 5A, that's not the 5A, sorry. That framework of the characteristic is the backbone of the research and survey that we're developing at the University of Michigan. Okay, we're developing indicators based on that 5 characteristic framework to have a better measure that includes basic needs and things that are not included in the extreme demand avoidance questionnaire. So that's a side note. Okay, awareness. So we need to truly and deeply understand our child's brain. And where people get confused is the cumulative nature. Okay, so it's not in the moment all the time, right? Where it's like, what happened right before and why did they have this reaction? It is building over time and a tipping point or a straw that breaks the camel's back. And so we have to look in like weeks and months and even the year preceding severe burnout to understand how they got to that threshold. Okay? And that's why accommodations have to be proactive and not just reactive, because we have to preempt them getting to the threshold of tolerance. What's the second part of the framework? Acceptance. Okay? Radical acceptance of the constraints and decision-making within them. Okay, so I've developed a cost-benefit decision-making framework unique to PDA parents of PDA children, some of whom are PDA. Okay, so I often get the question, hi everybody, I often get the question, well, aren't these accommodations and approaches useful for all neurodivergent kids and or even neurotypical kids? And yes, a lot of them are. And of course, we can experiment and observe and take data on our own children and use what works for us. However, the decision-making framework that a PDA parent, a parent of a PDAer, must use is unique because the cost of not accommodating is unique to PDA, right? It's part of that cumulative nature of nervous system activation, okay? So like for an ADHD kid or a demand avoidant kid who's not PDA, the cost of not accommodating won't necessarily lead to disabling of accessing basic needs. It might improve things, but therefore the cost-benefit decision-making of the parent is different. Okay, the cost of not accommodating is different. So what we have to radically accept is one thing. You're either activating or accommodating your child. There's no gray space. There's no in between. And I don't usually work in binaries, but this is one that we have to accept. That's it. There's no option C. There's no gray space. And ultimately, parents get stuck in not truly accepting this. Okay? Let me give you some examples. Happens to me all the time. This is why we always have to come back to it. Working with a family, one of the behaviors that parents have the most struggle with is the not the panic attacks, right? Where it's clear that this is a fight-flight response, but in the small, irrational, controlling, equalizing type things where it seems like the child is manipulative or that they have control over the behavior, etc. Okay, so let's take an example. Dad's ready to play with PDA kid, and we're going to be doing some art because that's what the child suggested. And the child is controlling and correcting the dad, which can be difficult as a parental experience, and saying like, do this, and then, they don't like what you draw. No, that's not how I wanted it. And then you try and do it how they say, and then it's like, they start like, because it's not what they wanted. And that's really hard because you're doing your best. But then the child says, I need a marker. So the dad goes to get a marker. Like, I need a red marker. Dad gets the red marker. I said I wanted a crayon. Okay, so here's where we stop and realize on a very micro level, radical acceptance. Okay, so 99 out of 100 times, because of our conditioning and because we haven't radically accepted or truly understood the brain, we're going to be like, you said you wanted a crayon. Or sorry, you wanted a red marker. You're going to try and teach. You're going to try and correct. You're going to have the mindset of like, I can't let them treat me like this, or they'll treat other people like this. I can't let them lie, etc. Right? That's an example of not radically accepting who your child is and how their brain works. Okay? Because they're here. They're in the limbic system. They literally cannot learn. They cannot learn. They cannot. You're not teaching them anything by saying, you said this, blah, blah, blah. What you're doing is activating them. You're either activating or accommodating. That's just the way it is. It's not a philosophical thing, right? So what can we do to accommodate? We can say, okay, honey, I'll get the crayon, right? But that's where parents get stuck. They think they're accommodating by lowering demands, but they're not diffusing the threat response or the activation in the part of the brain that doesn't think rationally, right? That's this part of the brain. And what the accommodations do is get them back here. So long term, they can actually process rational information, access empathy, and learn, okay? But in the boots on the ground, actually doing this accommodation, and this isn't a criticism, like I'm just pointing out that even parents who are like, yeah, we're lowering all the demands and we're totally doing this, like we can hone in, and this is what we do in the paradigm shift of like, are you actually radically accepting this choice point? Okay? It's not like this nebulous, like radically accept your child, like everything is unicorns and butterflies. No, it's like, am I radically accepting that I only have these two choices? Okay? On a larger scale, let's take a larger scale. Sometimes parents go through the program, and this isn't true for all of them. Like sometimes they do all the accommodations and the micro stuff, and like things really improve for their kid, and they don't have to make as big of structural changes as other families. I don't know which family is going to be which, right? Every family has a unique path, and it's going to be their path. It's not going to be like this is the right way to do it. But sometimes parents go all in, they do all the refinement, they like, the marker and the crayon, they're doing it. They're like, sure, honey, I'll get the crayon, right? Like they're accommodating, they're diffusing, they're bringing their child over and over and over back into the frontal lobe. But there are some structural things that they have not been willing to look at clearly, right? So, for example, the child is at school 9 hours a day at a public school where they're applying traditional ADHD and autism accommodations or supports, which are behavioral in nature. So all day at school, they're just being pushed back into the limbic system. Then the kid comes home and they're violent, okay? No matter how much the parents are accommodating, because it's in accumulation, okay? So like if you have this much that's at home and this much that's at school, I don't have any tools to make what's happening at school go away besides a decision-making framework to see clearly you might have to make that trade-off. You can accept the violence, or you can take your kid out of school, or you can advocate for a different type of accommodation, and I will give you tools for that in the Paradigm Shift program. But sometimes schools don't listen, right? I can't control that, like as a parent, educator, or coach, and like seeing that clearly and understanding there are constraints that you cannot change, and it sucks, and there's grief, and there's rage, and I'm angry about it too, but like that doesn't serve to get you unstuck and towards peace, right? And so, you know, there will be triggering moments in this acceptance part of the 5A framework, because that's the crux. That's the point at which things can really start to change for your family, truly, okay? So again, radical acceptance is not this like, I'm sitting on, you know, I'm a Zen Buddha and I'm sitting on the top of a hill and I'm not bothered by anything. Like, that's not what this is, okay? So third, we have the accommodation module, which is where this is the how to implement, okay? So I walk parents through a scientific process, which is like, we have a hypothesis, which is how your kid's brain works, and parents might have different hypotheses. Some of these kids have OCD and PDA. Some of these kids are more typical expression of autism and less high masking and PDA. It's unique to each family, okay? So they develop their individual hypotheses about the root cause based on the previous modules. Then we pick the 12, we have 9 proactive accommodations, which we can experiment with, and then 3 responsive accommodations, okay? So the responsive ones are diffusion, de-escalation, and risk mitigation. That's what we can do in the moment in response to big activation or equalizing behavior. We experiment with those over a long-term horizon in a consistent way, and we collect data on 3 things. How is the child's nervous system health based on how often are they going into fight, flight, freeze? How long are they staying there? How intense is it? And I give you indicators. Second, connection with you. Are they voluntarily putting their head on your shoulder for the first time in 2 years? Like, these are the things I look for when parents are moving through the program. A parent who's posting a video of their kid holding their hand while watching a video for the first time in 2 years. And of course it brings tears to my eyes, because that's like what I care about, is like, yes, like you're getting back to your identity and your sensation that you are a beautiful parent already, and this connection with your child, which is going to change the trajectory of their lives. And then third, access to basic needs, right? Are they sleeping better? Are they eating better? Are they having more independence toileting? Are they able to access hygiene? Is it safer for them to exist in the world? Or are they running out into traffic and towards cars, right? Like, and unfortunate radical acceptance part, the cost-benefit framework that we have to work through, is sometimes, especially in the short, medium term, so like a year or 2, you might have to decide between compliance and good behavior and those other indicators. That's just what it is, right? Like, sometimes parents get triggered with me, and that's fine. You can project onto me, but like, I'm just naming the truth of the situation. Okay, so we work through the accommodations, we collect data, we discern whether or not they're with your own eyes. Like, I'm not the one who decides, like, is this working? You decide, because you're collecting data, right? I feel very proud, I'm just going to say it. I feel very proud of this program and this framework and the way that I'm working with parents, because I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not like, this is the right way, right? Because the whole point is that you leave the program or our work in coaching, and it's like, I don't need Casey, because I'm just as good a parent as she is, and I have all the tools I need to make decisions for my unique family. That's what I want for you. I don't want you to see me as like, well, Casey would know what to do. I need her in my back pocket. You have yourself in your back pocket. You can do this. Okay, 4th, affirmation. This is the 4th of the 5A framework. This is when we parse the threat response away from identity, and I walk you through, based on the accommodations, how to help your child develop a healthy self-concept, which is the foundation of them managing their own nervous system disability. Okay? If they're not aware of how their body works and don't have consent and collaboration and input and autonomy, because they might not resonate with the PDA identity, and that's okay. Right? They get to choose, but we're going to walk through a process of how to do this. And then the fifth is advocacy, which is like expanding safety outside of your home. And we talk about how to actually do this, okay, within constraints, how to communicate, how to advocate, how to set boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. And so the 3 months of the Paradigm Shift program is your practice. It's like the foundation that you need, but then we're all going to put it into practice in terms of action, okay? So the transformation that I want for you, whether or not you ever purchase anything from me, like just hang out with me on this page and that's all good. Like I know that not every parent can invest in a program that's more than $1,000. I know that every family has these trade-offs of like, I had to leave my career and finances were tight for a long time. However, I do believe that this is something that will pay dividends for the rest of your child's life, meaning into adulthood. I do believe that this program is a one-time investment that is lifetime access for everything that you need, and I will continue to add to it in the years to come, right? So there's a members-only podcast. Every time I answer a question in a Paradigm Shift program, it is broken down, anonymized, put into a 3 to 5 minute podcast episode. So I'm in your earbuds for any question you have on the way to the grocery store. And I'll keep putting them in there, right? Same thing with the videos, right? It's always like a live experience in the sense of like, if I see a bunch of people asking about the same concept, like last program, it was cognitive loops. I will create a video on cognitive loops, right? And like, all the alumni, so if you've already taken this program, I know it's a very different version because I started out smaller and I started out with less experience. You are going to get all of this as an alumni. So even if you were like in my very first program 2 years ago, like you will get all of this. It's lifetime access, okay? So, and to you who trusted me when I was like very early on, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for trusting me with the most precious asset and resource, which is your family and trust. And that is why I want to include you in everything I do moving forward with this program. Okay? So the transformation. I can never guarantee that your child will be compliant, that they'll go back to school, that things are going to be easy. It will not be easy. Okay? In fact, it might feel harder for a while. However, I can't guarantee anything because really it's up to you whether or not you take action and implement, and I can't control other people. Key. But if you take action and use the tools, what I feel like the transformation is that I witness is you will know in your bones, heart, and gut that you are on the right path, your right path, and you will stop doubting yourself and letting others define your journey for you. You will be empowered and you'll have the tools and the language and the resourced experience of other parents doing it with you to stop taking shit and just feel like this is what we're doing, right? And I know some of you have partners who aren't on board. Again, I can't guarantee that that's going to shift. However, I've structured the program so that the other partner can autonomously experience the program at their own pace. It includes 2 household logins. You will be, as I said, strengthened and empowered to know what to do, no matter what comes, no matter if it's something that we've talked about or not, because these are tools. It's a decision-making framework. You will have the lens through which to look at the cost benefits, place them within your particular family, and decide. Okay? And sometimes you're going to be deciding between 2 shitty options, but you will know that there's not a third magical unicorn option because you will have radically accepted the constraints, which will free you. Third, you will watch your child's behavior improve in terms of fight, flight, freeze, not necessarily politeness and compliance, but fight, flight, freeze, the behavioral expression of the disability, connection with you, and their access to basic needs over the long term. Okay? And this sometimes happens. It doesn't happen frequently, but it's happened in both coaching and paradigm shift program, is you'll go through the program and realize, you know what? I think that actually this is not the right fit for my family. But then you will have clarity. Okay? So there have been a very small minority of families who I've worked with who have tried the accommodation program or long-term approach, seen with their own two eyes and felt in their body how it felt intuitively in their family, and decided, you know what? I think OCD is more at the root of this, and I'm going to work with this professional through the exposure framework and some more behavioral approaches. Guess what? Awesome. Awesome. Because you have clarity now, and you don't have to mess around with like not knowing what to do and being stuck. You got unstuck. And it's not about like me being right. It's about your family being well and your child being well. And this is why I constantly say it's not philosophical, right? Like there are some cases where, and you know, I have peers and family members who use a more behavioral framework with their kids, not PDA, and it works great, right? So it's not like I'm like, ooh, they're not a good parent because like that's not the right philosophical approach to parenting. I'm just like, okay, it works for their kids. And that's how I feel about you guys. I want you to get clarity and feel peace. Okay? So now, if some of you are still here, I know people come on, drop off, etc. Although if you're on the wait list, you will get the replay. And hopefully you're watching it. The Q&A is about the parent journey, the 5A framework, any questions you have, and or the paradigm shift program, logistics, anything you want to know. So I'm going to go back through here and see if people ask questions about the topics at hand. Hi from Australia. Nice to see you too. Hi. Another Aussie, Lauren says. Cherry Bomb Blaska. I don't know where they are, but hello. Lots of waves. I experienced none of that, so it's not always a prediction. Yeah, no, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, every experience is unique, so it's totally cool if people come to my page and are like, yeah, that doesn't work for my family. And it's like, okay. Okay. Right? But where I would push a tiny bit is like, are you accepting the trade-off, right? Or are you still searching for the magical option C that doesn't exist? And like only you can answer that, right? Cherry Bomb Blaska says, I was the same, colic drop, cycling, legs bouncing for hours, refusing feeding, sleep, all the things. Yes, 100%. That is a natural feeling in every parent. Well, not every parent has the same experience, so I wouldn't do a blanket statement like that. My middle child was like that as a baby. Yeah, screaming in such distress whenever anyone else held her, to the point that it seemed as though something life-threatening was occurring. Yeah, because it's a threat response. So it's the same thing that your baby's body and nervous system and brain would do if it were a life-threatening situation, which is why so many of us have trauma, right? Because you're the parent and you're perceiving sensorially through the sounds, movements, facial expressions of your child or infant as if they were being harmed over and over and over again. So like physiologically and nervous system wise, you are wired to have your own nervous system response because we're wired to keep our offspring alive or our children alive, right? So I'm not excluding adopted parents here. I'm just, simplifying for the whole point, which is like nervous system activation is happening in both the parent and the child. This is why we can't separate the journey towards peace and stability. Hello from Australia. Blue Lion Glitter 28. Nice to see you. All right, I see some rude comments from the same person, so we're just going to hit that block button. Oh, wow, that's my daughter. We've jokingly suggested polyamory for this reason. Yeah, totally. No judgment. And people still accuse me of doing nothing. Yeah, God, nobody gets it. The number of parenting books I've read, I know. And how many times did you want to just be like, throw it against the wall? Or like, I've talked to parents who like have shown me the parenting books where they've written in the columns, like, not my kid, right? Because it's like, doesn't apply. Yeah, so many things. Yes, you're welcome. I learned early on our pediatrician didn't know anything. Have you done TheraPlay? Yes, I answered that question. Our mother-in-law has been here as a 24-hour support person. I'm just finally realizing how high his support needs truly are. Yeah, I'm so glad you have your mother-in-law. Oh my God, the magic bullet thinking. Yes, we've all been through it, right? We've all been through it. Okay. Let's see. I don't see any questions so far. Oh, how many people do you allow in the PSP? So there will be at least, well, I hope. Last time we had 100 families. Okay, so it depends on how many people purchase. I will say there is a very long wait list. So if you are interested, I would join the wait list because we're going to open to the wait list first. So it will be at least, I hope, at least 100 families. So it's not a small program. But I think that's part of the power of like my workshops and programs is that you get to be in this big community going through this process or like this college level course on PDA, implementing, and you can often find connections across experience, whether you're neurotypical as a parent or a PDA identifying parent. And that's why we have like the guest experts that are more niched down, of like maybe 1/5 of the parents will struggle with feeding. Another subset will struggle with like toileting, but we're like bringing in an expert for feeding. So with the guest experts, it's more niche down, and the community is an opportunity to connect with families either in your geographic area or in your age group. And so I think it's nice to have a bigger group moving through. So it's not a mastermind. It's not like a small group experience with coaching. It's a course, a program. Oh, thanks. That's a nice comment. I really wish this was captioned so I could participate while my kids are around. Okay, so I don't know how to say your name, but I wish that too. I don't know how to do it on an Instagram Live. However, there will be transcripts and captions for the videos in the program. Okay, so it's going to be much easier to participate. For example, like all the teaching videos, which are pre-recorded, are 10 minutes. And you're going to have a transcript and captions, and then the lives will put up with captions and transcripts as well. So if you can't attend them live, you can have them in your learning portal. And then the members only podcast is like broken down into small bits, so you can really, pop them into your earbud while you're doing other things, right? So difference between PDA and PANS PANDAS. My son is exhibiting tics, anxiety, need for control, loss of skills, abilities. He is suddenly appearing autistic. Has he just reached his PDA threshold? That's a great question. I can't answer it without knowing more context. I mean, PANS and PANDAS is an autoimmune response that affects the nervous system because of like a strep or previous infection. And therefore it can be treated with antibiotics and long-term immune health professionals. PDA is a neurotype. And if you look at subtle differences, and if you haven't taken the Clarity workshop or the Clarity Masterclass, I would suggest you do, because it's like 70 minutes of going into what exactly you would see starting when they were younger, right? So it's like, yes, they may have reached a threshold or become PANS PANDAS after a strep or other infection. But if And I do think that, I know that kids who are already neurodivergent are more susceptible to autoimmune disorder, so it's often not binary. But like, you can look for data and indicators in your own lived experience to indicate whether or not there was PDA present. We're in the ruling things out phase. Yeah, hi from Denmark. Hello. Good to see you. Hi from South Africa. Do you tend to recommend the accommodation approach for all kids in family? That's something that you have to make decisions on for yourself. So for example, like, I break down the 12 effective accommodations, right? Which is like, some of them I use for my non-PDA son, like humor and play, and I try and provide more autonomy and co-regulation and de-escalation. But the cost-benefit framework for him is different, because the cost of not accommodating him is much lower. Like, he's not going to be traumatized. So I make different decisions, right? And then we have to place it in the family context, which is something we do in the program, right? So it would be like you applying this way of thinking and this lens and this tool to your particular family. And ultimately, there's no one right answer. And if anyone says that there is, you can be a little bit wary, you know, because it's like they're replacing, like, we're trying to get away from the rules, dogma, judgment, external guru or authority telling you what to do. So I really feel strongly about not replacing that with me being the guru, authority telling you what to do. More rules, more dogma, right? So the program is to teach you to make your own decisions. Oh, I'm so glad. I feel stuck in my journey, not sure if I'm or not radically accepting the two only options of accommodating or activating. I believe I am, but feeling so exhausted, maybe even in trauma for all the aggressive behavior, that I feel like I do not have more to give. Yeah, no, that's a very common experience. And like, I will say that radical acceptance is a lifelong process, right? Like, and it's part of like Buddhism and spiritual traditions that people work their whole lives on. So it's not like you like all of a sudden radically accept and never have to work on it again. It's a practice, and one I practice every day, right? It's like why I meditate, and I'm always working through this stuff myself to like continually deepen. Where do you find out about your workshops? So you can go to my website or the link in the bio on Instagram, and there's like a page for the $25 master classes. I have two $95 courses. One's the Progress with PDA, which is like about the accommodations, how to implement them through an experimental framework and collecting data. And the other one is connection and communication to like shift the way that you're connecting with your child or teen. And those are all already recorded. You can purchase them whenever. This paradigm shift program is currently my only live offer with me besides coaching. I think I've accepted my son's disability, but I'm not sure my husband has. But he sees my son's behavior for the better when I implemented your strategies. Also, hello from California. Wonderful. We are trying to work out if we should make a school change for better cultural fit, more peace, and access to nature. Structural phase. You're in the structural phase. Terrified of going backwards in a new environment. So one thing that can help, which is inherent in what I teach, is just looking at it as an experiment, right? You're just going to experiment and collect data, make decisions. We make mistakes. We are imperfect. We make the wrong decisions sometimes, but all we can do with the information we have is develop a hypothesis, commit to making a decision, implementing, and then collecting data and making another decision. And if you see it as just data, it will feel less scary and less personal. Okay. All right, my friends, I hope that was helpful. I will be back tomorrow for another live on radical acceptance and the theory of change for your family. So if you want the replay sent to you, join the wait list for the Paradigm Shift program, or you can catch it on YouTube, and eventually it will be on my podcast, so you can pop it into your earbuds. I hope this was helpful for everyone. I hope to see you in the Paradigm Shift program. It will be transformational if you apply and take action, and I will see you here tomorrow. Okay, bye.